Allow me to begin with a confession. You might think with a sermon series titled Dancing the Circle Wide, the Dance of Diversity, you might think that I am a liberal. I am a liberal on some things. And I am a conservative on some things. And just by what I have confessed, you should know the reality. The terms liberal and conservative are absolutely 100% bogus. Bogus. Erase them from your Christian vocabulary. Because when you say, I'm a liberal, you are assuming that truth is found in one particular perspective. When you say, I'm a conservative, you are assuming that it's found within that perspective. It is not. Truth is found in the Christian perspective. Christian perspective enables truth with a capital T to be understood. And that's what I am preaching about today, because to be a Christian does not mean to be a liberal-leaning person or a traditional, a progressive, or what have you. It means someone intentional about painting their portrait the same color that Jesus painted his portrait. Jesus painted a self-portrait of himself in the Beatitudes. And as we're talking about being a Christian in today's divisive society, it means that we imitate what he looks like, how he saw himself, how he carried himself, how he talked. Jesus said that around my Father's banquet table will be all types of people, equally placed around the table. Go out to the highways and the byways. And he said that if you're going to have such a diverse, beautiful kingdom, then you're going to have to be like I am, Jesus said, humble. That's the baseline of the Beatitudes, humble. Paul said in one of the hymns of praise that he, Jesus, did not count equality with God something to be kept, but he emptied himself, becoming like us, no better, no worse than any of us, to be with us as part of that experience. So if we're serious about dancing the circle wide, about imitating Christ, more to the point, we have to begin by really believing that we are no better than anybody else, period. And that means truly that if we feel that way, then we can better enter the world of a person different from ourselves. We would have the grace without the judgment to be able to look at life through their eyes, to feel what they feel, to hear what they hear. It's called empathy, and it builds upon it. And now today, we're going to the third building block of the dance of diversity of living as Jesus lived, into that self-portrait. And we're going to talk about justice. And we're going to talk about the words of a man that Jesus knew quite a bit about. It's one of the minor prophets, he's called, because he wrote a small book, Micah in the Old Testament. And to understand Micah's words that Joy's going to read to you in a couple of minutes, you need to hear the background. Micah and his contemporary Isaiah, better known prophet, lived in the southern kingdom of Judah. And you ought to note that even the chosen people couldn't get along with each other. There's a northern kingdom, Israel, southern kingdom, Judah. Micah and Isaiah lived around the Jerusalem area, and in 738, the Assyrians came and totally obliterated the northern kingdom. The prophets in the southern kingdom saw that as a sign of God's judgment against unjust people, because the Hebrews had developed quite a few unjust ways. And that's why you hear the most famous line from Micah in the 6th chapter of his book when he said, "What does the Lord require of you, O man, O woman? Then this, to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly." But before that famous passage, Micah wrote something else. And when Jory reads it, I ask you to ask yourselves, now where have I heard that before?
But in the days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house will be the highest of the mountains. It will be lifted above the hills. People will stream to it. Many nations will go and say, "Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of Jacob's God, so that he may teach us his ways and we may walk in God's paths. Instruction will come from Zion, and the Lord's word from Jerusalem. God will judge between the nations and settle disputes of mighty nations which are far away. They will beat their swords into iron plows and their spears into pruning tools. Nation will not take up sword against nation. They will no longer learn how to make war. All will sit underneath their own grapevines, under their own fig trees. There will be no one to terrify them, for the mouth of the Lord of heavenly forces has spoken. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. So where do you think you've heard, and they'll beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks? Well, you heard it not just in Micah. You would have also heard it in Isaiah. Remember, they're two contemporaries? And you would not have heard it on September 17th. You would have heard it during the first Sunday of Advent, because that's a traditional passage that's read according to the lectionary. And that passage in Isaiah, after about the swords and the plowshares and so forth, ends with a vision of peace. And of course, Jesus, the Savior born to us, will be the Prince of Peace that will usher in such a kingdom. But if you heard carefully, listen carefully to what Joy read to you, that's not the way Micah ends his passage. He ends it this way: all will sit underneath their own grapevines, under their own fig trees, and no one will terrify them. See what he's saying? He is saying that if you want to have peace, you must first have justice. That means that I would be free to buy my land, to plant my crops, to enjoy the bounty from my crops, to sell it at a just wage, and to do that without any fear. That is justice that enables peace. And that radical vision, justice in order to have peace, that radical vision is at the very heart of God. It's at the very beginning of Israelite history, because God saw the plight of the Israelite slaves in Pharaoh's land. And so God said to Moses, go down, tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And so out of oppression, God took them, gave them the promised land flowing with milk and honey. And what did they do? They became prosperous, and they made up laws so that they could take advantage of the others within Hebrew society. And so God raised up Micah and Isaiah and Hosea and Amos and said, no, you are oppressing my people just like Egypt oppressed you. You have to be able to provide an even playing field for all, because that's what justice is. It's where everyone has the ability to carve out a life for their own, not being ruled by people with more power or with more resources. You have to have that type of society, chosen people. That's what the prophet said. And that's what Jesus said. When he embodied that self-portrait of Jesus, absolute mercy, but absolute justice, where he would go to the women of the society and treat them with dignity and with respect, where he would make sure that he would touch those that society wouldn't touch, the lepers, the outcasts, the sinners, because all are equal before God's eyes, and all should have equal access around the kingdom's banquet table. God's desire is for justice for all. And we as Christians can see the next step to that, and that is justice for all, including those people who are not like us, including those people with whom we disagree. Let me read to you a reflection I wrote about this. Justice is not a religious right. It is a human right. And when a person's Christian beliefs prohibit justice for some, then I would be curious about that person's view of Jesus, because that's not how I see Jesus. People have used religion to deny justice to blacks, to gays, to Jews and Muslims, to women, to divorcees, to immigrants, and the list, I suppose, could go on. Friends, being tacky to people unlike yourself is not a Christian virtue. When we're tacky with people who see things differently from ourselves, well, for example, when we refuse service to someone we don't agree with or who offend our religion, then we're living in a way that is fundamentally different from how Jesus lived. He talked with people. He asked questions of people to get to know them. He challenged them when needed, and he gave comfort when needed. And he did all of this in a spirit of unconditional love. We imitate Jesus simply by being kind and respectful of people different from ourselves. Duh! How hard is that? It does not show that an abdication of your beliefs by being nice to someone who doesn't believe like you. On the contrary, it shows the strength of your beliefs. Because upon the basis of absolute justice and absolute mercy, the core of Jesus' gospel, that's how we live. And so we're not needing to be defensive about anybody. Again, at the heart of God is justice for all. And that means that if I'm a migrant worker, I get paid the same as an American who is working beside me on a hot summer's day replacing a roof. That means if I'm a woman, I get equal pay for equal work that a man does. That also means that if I'm a woman, I can preach in a pulpit just as a man does and probably do it better. It means that if I'm a man, I get... This is two. That's a second. Now, where was I? That means if I'm a man, justice for all means that I get a paternity leave equal to a maternity leave. That means if I'm a human, I get access to health care. It simply makes sense because this is what justice for all means. It's not rocket science. Listen to your heart. Use your mind. Be kind and respectful, and you will be just. That's the basis. And justice for all means to be just for those who are different, and we do know that there are a lot of different people out there. A lot of different people out there, different from us. A couple of weeks ago, my wife and I were hiking one of the trails at Babbler State Park. And as we're going up a trail, around a bend comes a couple of women dressed in burqas approaching us. And I said to myself, well, this is different. And I got defensive. Because I've seen pictures on TV, I've seen media about people different from me dressed like that. What could they be having under their robes, under their dress? All of this just flashed through my mind, the judgment, just flashed, couldn't help it. And they came closer as we kept walking, and they come up to me, and one of them says, "We're lost. Can you help us find the way?" And since I have the sense of a direction of an earthworm, I couldn't. But we stayed lost together for a couple of minutes, continuing to talk. And we said, well, we think this trail goes this way. And where does this trail that you came from go? And we just kept talking. And you know what, folks? We are all lost. We just need each other to help us find the way. Even from folks who don't exactly look like us, two delightful people in burqas. Yeah, there are people different from us all over the place. Like if you were to go into the classrooms, 300 level during the week, you're going to find some folks from other countries in our English as second language classrooms. The other day, I stopped by. In one classroom, there was a tutor teaching 3 students. One was from Syria, one from Hong Kong, and one from Brazil. You don't get any more different than that. But there is justice being served to those folks because they were learning English so that they could get a better job in our society and have a better way of better lifestyle in enabling their children to grow and prosper in this land. Justice for all, especially those different from ourselves. I suppose you could go on downtown and see some folks who are different, like the folks who are served at Kingdom House. And you get connected to them, you discover that, yeah, they might not have exactly the same salary or what have you that we do, but they sure have the same needs and hopes and dreams. And as you connect, you understand that this is what justice looks like. Understand that we're all alike, and to advocate as best we can on behalf of those, especially those who are different from us and may not have the same opportunities. I think that's a good way to put it, because justice, real justice, when you connect to someone, means that you automatically want to stand up for someone. Even a little girl who had a dream of being a cheerleader, but she found it difficult because she was, you see, different. A whole middle school basketball team stands up for a girl with Down syndrome. The entire school renames their gym Dee's House, naming it after her. That's justice. That's the face of justice. Standing up for someone different. So who will you stand up for? School? Work? On the street? Make no mistake about it. Being Christian is not just sitting in a beautiful sanctuary thinking nice thoughts. Being Christian means going beyond these walls, connecting with people, and making sure they have an opportunity to buy their land, plant their vineyard and their fig trees, and reap a harvest of peace and hope. Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who helped overturn apartheid in South Africa, once said, "When the missionaries came to my country, they had the Bible, we had the land. They asked us to pray, we closed our eyes. When we opened them, we had the Bible and they had the land." Enough injustice has been done in the name of Christianity. It's time to turn a new page. It is time truly to walk with our brothers and sisters and turn the weapons of injustice, of swords and spears, into plowshares and into pruning hooks, so that they too can live in peace. If you believe that gospel and you commit yourself to that gospel, join me in this closing prayer. Who has been denied justice? And the people said, who has been shunned and avoided? And the people said, where can we make a difference in the lives of these, our brothers and sisters? And the people said, give us eyes to see and ears to hear.